Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight's show I called Flying Monsters. I was going to call it Flying Dinosaurs, but some of the sightings that I found were not actually dinosaurs, but giant birds. I kicked around a few other ideas, and then I came up with flying giants. But most people associate giants as being humans, and I'm not talking about giant flying humans, so I changed the name once more to Flying Monsters. This first story comes out of California. I read a lot of articles about this place until I could finally determine that yes, this thing actually did fly. It takes a lot of digging and reading to make a 1-hour show. I sometimes wonder how folks like Clyde Lewis do it. He has a 5-hour show 5 days a week. Well, I guess maybe he has a bunch of people that help him with the research. If I had to do 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, the weeks just aren't long enough. Anyway, there are at least 10 different Elizabeth lakes in California. One is in LA County, near Palmdale, and is believed to be the oldest one in the state. Legend states that the devil himself created the lake and then placed one of his pets inside of it to keep an eye on things. If you swim deep enough and can make it all the way to the bottom, eventually you're able to find a secret passage that will take you to the underworld. Seeing as the lake lies directly over San Andreas fault line, maybe this is considered the opening to Hades. Some of the Indians living near the lake called it Spirit Lake. They didn't have anything like the devil. Instead, there were spirits, some evil and some just odd. They were responsible for doing things good, some bad, some just plain unusual. Trickster spirits. A Devil Lake, or Devil's Canyon, got their names because when the settlers would ask the locals, "What's that place called?" and they heard the word spirit, they just simply associated spirit with devil. So when you see something like Devil's Canyon or Devil's Cliff, it was originally called Spirit. The Indians said the lake was created by the spirits, and the Spanish thought this meant the devil. The settlers wanted something more familiar to them, and they renamed Spirit Lake to Elizabeth Lake. Around 1830 or so, a Spaniard named Don Pedro Carrillo had settled near the lake, considering it a good spot to raise livestock. Don is a Spanish title, like Sir in English. One man with his family didn't go out in the middle of nowhere and try to live. There was usually a group of families. There would be the man in charge, the Don. Then there would be somebody to help take care of his younger kids. His wife didn't have the time or the ability. She was too busy looking good and lounging about the house, I guess. Something like that. Anyway, the ones too young to be left on their own had to have somebody taking care of them, so they would have a caretaker. There would be people to tend the crops and take care of the animals. These people all brought families with them as well. Eventually, you would have 10 or 12 families all living in one spot, but it would be called after whoever the head guy was. Nothing happened for the first few months. But then things got interesting. Late at night, people would hear eerie screams coming from the brush near the lake. Some said it sounded as if somebody was being murdered. The sounds made people afraid to move about the ranch after sundown. Being a large ranch, somebody had to go out on occasion to tend the animals or move from house to house. Say the kid's caretaker had to go home to her family. These folks began seeing something huge passing overhead. It was just a black shape on a black sky, but as so many people saw it, they began to think there was some kind of a giant creature flying around the ranch. On occasion, when the moon was up, people saw what looked like a giant bird flying through the night. Things finally came to an end when all of the buildings all caught fire and burned to the ground in the middle of the night. There's no report of anybody being hurt or killed, but the ranch was a total loss. Don Carrillo packed what little he had left and moved his people to a new location, far from the lake. In the 1830s, the United States only went as far as from Louisiana to Wisconsin. From Texas to California was all still part of Spain, but some U.S. citizens did try to settle farther west. A few folks wound up in the area near Elizabeth Lake. Spain wasn't concerned with who was where. As long as any taxes got paid, they weren't going to push the issue about whether you were born in Spain or not. California became the 31st state in 1850. U.S. citizens tried establishing settlements near the lake once more, only to move away soon after. They all reported hearing unearthly screams coming from the lake at night. On occasion, livestock vanished, leading to these ranchers believing something unnatural was coming out of the water at night. People heard what sounded like flapping of huge wings passing overhead. At some time around then, Spanish missionaries living in the area began calling Elizabeth Lake Laguna del Diablo, or Lake of the Devil. Around this time, the muzzleloader was replaced by the Henry rifle, which was a 16-shot, 44 caliber rim-fired breech-loading lever-action rifle, patented by Benjamin Taylor Henry in 1860. The Henry used copper rim-fire cartridges with a 216-grain bullet propelled by 25 grains of black powder. The Henry rifle was expensive to make, and it took a lot of work to make just one. That's why the soldiers in the Civil War were still using muzzleloaders to wipe each other out. By 1870, Don Chico Lopez and Don Chico Vasquez arrived in the area and thought the lake was the place to be. They established a huge ranch right on the edge of Elizabeth Lake. They built a bunch of small buildings to house livestock and several ranch houses for the workers. And then, of course, there was the grand house where the rich folks lived. There's a lot of labor involved in working a ranch. Back then, it was nothing like today. There were no tractors, no modern storage, and no electricity. When the sun went down, the day was over. A torch would only illuminate the area right under you. People out after dark began hearing these strange cries once more. Screams coming from out in the water. Livestock began disappearing. Wolves and coyotes might take out one or two animals out in the pasture, but animals in the pens began to go missing. Men out trying to stop these predations would hear and sometimes see something flying around the corrals. To drive off the creature, or maybe bring it down, some of the ranch hands began carrying rifles while out at night. Shooting in the daytime was one thing, but these guys were trying to hit a moving target at night. Still, you do what you have to do when you have to do it. The ranch hands all began saying the creature was bulletproof. They swore they hit it, only to watch this giant flying thing just flap its wings and leave. Ranch hands began to leave, saying it was just too dangerous to stay. Things got very bad, and eventually the ranch was no longer making a profit. So the two Dons began looking for somebody that could buy the ranch so they wouldn't lose their entire investment. In around 1870s, Miguel Leonis purchased the ranch. I'll bet the two Dons didn't bother mentioning the giant flying creature coming from the lake at night. Leonis was a Basque immigrant. The Basque have a reputation for not giving up. During the Muslim conquests of Spain, the Basque region stayed Christian. During the Spanish Civil War, the Basque region stayed loyal to the president up until they were totally run over by Franco's soldiers. Miguel Leonis was said to be a large, burly man. He had managed to acquire a large amount of land throughout Southern California. He ruled over it like a dictator. The squatters were often severely dealt with, either through lawsuits or possibly armed force. When the Elizabeth Lake monster began killing off livestock, Leonis became incensed. How dare some overgrown bird munch on his property? Leonis set up camp out near where the ranch hands had mostly sighted this creature, and then he sat there and waited. Late one night, Leonis and his men heard the creature coming from the lake. He had brought several men, all armed with rifles. He took aim and fired. All of his men began shooting as well. The creature landed on the ground right in front of Leonis. The bullets just seemed to bounce off of its hide. So, being that kind of a guy, Leonis attacked it, trying to beat it to death with the butt of the rifle. You may be bulletproof, but I'll still cave in your head. The creature must have had enough, because it took to the air and flew away, heading east. All the stories of the Elizabeth Lake monster came to an end around this time. People believed the monster might have flown as far as Arizona before finding a new place to call home. As for Leonis, he died a short time later in a bizarre wagon accident. Most folks didn't much like him, and it is said there might have been foul play involved. Today, the area where the ranch had been is haunted by the ghost of him and his wife. I don't know how the link was established, but the Elizabeth Lake monster was then sighted around Tombstone, Arizona. Tombstone is an historic city in Cochise County, Arizona, and it was founded in 1877 by a prospector named Ed Schifflin in what was then Pima County, Arizona Territory. It became one of the last boom towns in the American frontier. Was it really the same creature or something that sounded a lot like the earlier attacks is unknown, but somebody made the connection. Ranchers began seeing some giant thing flying around the desert near Pima County sometime around 1880. Ranch hands would see something flying through the sky, but they were unable to identify it. As time passed, the sightings became more prevalent, and some folks got a better look. They described the thing, the giant, as looking something like a flying crocodile. People may have heard about the Elizabeth Lake creature, and they decided this was the same beast. The trouble with seeing something up in the air, it's very hard to get a good size on it because there's nothing to compare it to. You can say it looked big, but you can't say how big. The stories of the huge flying creature were told all around the county. The Tombstone Epitaph published this news article April 26, 1890. The article said, "A winged monster resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings was found on the desert between Whetstone and Wahuka Mountains last Sunday by two ranchers who were returning home from Wahukas. The creature was eventually greatly exhausted by a long flight and when discovered was unable to fly but a short distance at a time. After the first shock of wild amazement had passed, the two men, who were on horseback and armed with Winchester rifles, regained sufficient courage to pursue the monster, and after an exciting chase of several miles, succeeded in getting near enough to open fire with their rifles and wounding the beast. The creature then turned on the men, but owing to its exhausted condition, they were able to keep out of its way, and after a few well-directed shots, the monster partly rolled over and remained motionless. The men cautiously approached their horses snorting with terror, and they found the creature was dead. They then proceeded to make an examination and found that it measured about 92 feet in length, and the greatest diameter was about 50 inches. The monster had only 2 feet, these being situated a short distance in front of where the wings were joined to the body. The head, as near as they could judge, was about 8 feet long, the jaws being thickly set with strong, sharp teeth. Its eyes were as large as dinner plates and protruded about halfway from the head. They had some difficulty in measuring the wings, as they were partly folded under the body, but finally they managed to get one straightened out sufficiently to get a measurement. 78 feet. Making the total length from tip to tip about 160 feet. The wings were composed of a thick, nearly transparent membrane and were devoid of feathers or hair, as was the entire body. The skin of the body was comparatively smooth and easily penetrated by a bullet. The Elizabeth Lake monster was bulletproof, so I don't think this was the same creature. The men cut off a small portion of the tip of one wing and took it home with them. Late the next night, one of them arrived in the city for supplies and to make the necessary preparations to skin the creature. The hide was to be sent east for examination by eminent scientists of the day. The finder returned early this morning accompanied by several prominent men who will endeavor to bring the strange creature to this city before it is mutilated. If these prominent men were in any way connected to the Smithsonian, the skin would have vanished into a back room, never to be seen by us again. Tombstone had fallen on hard times in the 1890s, and they were in trouble. An earthquake had caused the silver mines to flood. Several attempts to pump out the water and revive the mines all failed. There were still several bars in town. Bars are usually the last place to close. But business was kind of on the outs. Everyone feared the town's heyday was long past and it would never return. Around this time, a photograph was supposed to have been taken of the giant creature. A group of 3 men nailed it to the side of a barn and then stood in front of it while the photo was taken. The image can be found on the internet, but its veracity is questioned by many. There's a second photo with 10 men and a dog. They're holding the dead creature up so the photographer could get the image. The more you look, the more images you can find. Some have soldiers in them wearing Civil War uniforms. There's a story that the soldiers brought down 4 giant flying creatures around 1863 or 64. The problem with any photo today is Photoshop has gotten so prevalent that fake photos are showing up everywhere. You can look at the photos, decide for yourself. Fake or not, they don't detract from the real story of the Elizabeth Lake monster or the flying creature shot near Tombstone. In 1963, a writer named Jack Pearl was working for Saga magazine. He said not only was there a photo of the creature shot near Tombstone, but he declared it had been published in the Tombstone Epitaph in 1886. He stated the picture showed the bird nailed to the wall. The newspaper said that he had been shot by 2 prospectors and hauled into town by wagon. Lined up in front of the bird were 6 grown men with their arms outstretched, fingertip to fingertip. The creature measured about 36 feet from wingtip to wingtip. I wonder what happened to those earlier measurements. Another writer, H.M. Cranmer, writing in Fate magazine in the fall of 1963, said that the picture had been published in the newspapers all over the country. Ivan T. Sanderson, considered an eminent researcher in the study of strange phenomena, claimed that not only did he see the photo, he once had a photocopy of it. Sanderson said he loaned out the photocopy only to never get it returned. I really hate when people borrow things and don't bring them back. I must be missing about 20 books. Somebody later came forward saying they remembered seeing Sanderson displaying the photo on Canadian television, although no copies of the show have been found. Italian naturalist Cosmo Alessandro Collini discovered the very first fossil evidence of pterodactyls in 1784, in Eichstatt limestone deposit of Bavaria, Germany. People would have known about pterodactyls back in the 1880s. Yet, the men who shot and killed the flying giant didn't say it was a pterodactyl. When I was growing up, flying dinosaurs were called pterodactyls. I had a little plastic one that came in a set. We could see them in museums, and they were all labeled pterodactyls. Then people began calling them pterosaurs. The brontosaurus became the apatosaurus. Well, I still consider Pluto to be a planet, no matter what the experts say. It's unclear at what point pterodactyl became the pop culture synonym for pterosaurs in general, and the pterodactylus or pterodon in particular, but the fact remains that it's this word most people prefer to use. Paleontologists try not to use the word pterodactyl, instead focusing on certain genera, of which there are literally hundreds. No scientist will call it a pterodactyl, except for Cosmo, who found the first one. Hey, if he can call it a pterodactyl, I don't know why the rest of us can't. He found the first one. Modern birds did not descend from pterosaurs, such as pterodactyls or the pterodon. Scientists say that the modern-day birds actually came from small, two-legged, meat-eating dinosaurs of the Jurassic and Cretaceous period, many of which were covered with feathers. Pterodactyls and pterodons were strictly reptilian in appearance, although there is evidence to suggest that at least some odd pterosaur sported hair-like growths. In the next few days, weeks, or months, some expert might come along and change all that we know about pterodactyls and pterodons. The largest species of flying creature back then was called the pterodactyl. The largest creature went by the name Quetzalcoatlus, a late Cretaceous pterosaur with a wingspan of 35 to 40 feet. This is about the size of a small plane. Quetzalcoatlus was named after Quetzalcoatl, the flying feathered god of the Aztecs. Quetzalcoatlus may itself one day be supplanted in the record books by Hatzegopteryx. Boy, these scientists love these long, hard-to-pronounce names. Hatzegopteryx, a comparably sized pterosaur represented by frustratingly fragmentary fossil remains found in Europe. There are only two specimens known today, about 66 million years old. What paleontologists do know at this point is that the Hatzegopteryx was a fish-eater that dwelled in the marine habitat, and like other pterosaurs, this thing could fly. And with all those scientific words now mispronounced and tied up into knots, I'm going to take a brief pause and play a couple commercials and try to get my scientific pronunciation back under control. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. Did you go out UFO hunting and couldn't focus on the sky? Swing on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle Del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. That's not a weather balloon, that's a flying saucer. Are you taking care of your skin, or are you going to wait and see how time treats you? Take care today by contacting Lourdes James, Independent Beauty Consultant, at 956-723-3019. Don't let time get the best of you. Coffee, nectar of the gods. And at the Organic Man Coffee Trike, you'll find coffee made the right way, one delicious cup at a time. Stop on by 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. Oops, and I forgot what I was going to do next. I won't play the music. Anyway, while other reports of pterosaur-like creatures have come out of Arizona, Mexico, and Crete, Central Africa has some interesting stories as well. While traveling through Zambia in 1923, Frank H. Milland collected reports from natives of an aggressive flying reptile that they called the Kangamoto, which means overwhelmer of boats. The natives, who were occasionally attacked by this creature or creatures, described them as being featherless with smooth skin. This or these flying creatures had a beak full of teeth and a wingspan between 4 and 7 feet. When shown illustrations of pterosaurs, Milland reported that the natives identified them as resembling the Kangamoto. In 1925, a native man was attacked by a creature that he identified as a pterosaur. This occurred near the swamp in Rhodesia, where the man suffered a large wound to his chest that he said was caused by the monster's long beak. In late 1980s, noted cryptozoologist Ray Mackall led an expedition into Namibia from which he had heard reports of the prehistoric-looking creature with a wingspan of up to 30 feet. As is common while looking for cryptids, they couldn't find the creature they were looking for. One or two people having a sighting or attack is understandable. The creature is maybe looking for a meal or just a snack. One or two people out by themselves would be an attractive lunch. The cryptid hunters come along and they set out with 10 to 20 men all hauling gear, and they're traipsing about the jungle. They make a lot of noise. The men in charge set up in a blind armed with cameras and recorders, hoping to see something that may come along once in a year. Most cryptid sightings are by accident. The few photos or videos are caught by sheer luck. I know a lot of cryptid hunters who have had a sighting long ago when they weren't looking for anything. Now they have spent years looking only to come home empty-handed. September 14, 1982, James Thompson was driving on a road near Los Fresnos, Texas, when he saw something large gliding low over the highway just ahead of his vehicle. He stopped and he stared at the animal that seemed to fly without moving its wings, like it was gliding. This is how a lot of large birds do it. Thompson reported the creature had a black or gray coloring. Its body appeared to be covered in rough-textured skin, like scales or snakes. The wings, which were 5 or 6 feet across, had no feathers. When he got home, Thompson looked up the animal in a book. The book said this was a pterosaur. Svan Taylor said, "Driving home yesterday, I saw 2 flying creatures side by side. At first, I thought these were geese. As I got closer, I thought they were sandhill cranes. But then, when I got to where they were flying just above my car, I saw these weren't birds at all. They were dark with matte leather bat-like wings. No feathers or claws. They had a point on their head and a long beak. Boy, were they huge. Pterodactyls used to be my favorite dinosaur when I was a kid, but to see even one, let alone 2, is still hard to wrap my head around." Jennifer Zakonski said, "I saw this thing in Durham, North Carolina the other day, as I was driving to the gym on Martin Luther King Boulevard. I'm a huge nature person, so my eyes are always wandering around the sky and the trees. I don't do drugs. I don't even drink. Nothing in my system but coffee. I'm a sane, rational woman, and I know what I saw. Right in front of my very 2 eyes, I saw this thing fly rather slowly across the road, right to left. It was much bigger than a heron, and it had a diamond-shaped fang on the end of its long, thin tail. That's what really stood out to me, because I don't know of any bird native to North Carolina with that kind of a tail." Darrell Ashley said, "I saw a pterodactyl in Lansing, Illinois, 1967. The whole sighting was about 20 to 25 seconds. There was no one out on the street as I went to my dad's car to run an errand. I couldn't get anybody else's attention to see it, and as I looked up and down the street, even into people's houses, but it was huge. I'd say the bat-like wingspan was 15 to 20 feet, and the body was about 10 to 12 feet long. It had a brown-grayish furry body with a dull red-crested top. I yelled as it got close, parallel to me, and over the roof about 10 feet above the trees. It turned its head as I yelled, and the second time I yelled, it turned its head toward me and looked right at me, opening its 4 to 6 foot long beak. The rows of teeth I saw in that beak told me this thing was dangerous and that I should shut up. I was watching in amazement as it flew directly west and out of sight. Also, it had a long tail, maybe 4 or 5 feet long, with a dark spade-like end. It made no sound. I got a feeling now that there are a lot of people like me who have never reported this kind of thing. What did these folks see that they all said looked like a flying creature from the past? What on earth looks like an ancient flying dinosaur? Could a person be carried away by a pterodactyl? Most pterodactyls were small, about 4 to 6 feet. In order to fly, they had to be very light. This would make it impossible for them to lift a person off the ground. How many Americans say they think they might have seen a modern-day pterosaur or pterodactyl? Just in the United States, there is an estimated 150,000 sightings. This is based on reports turned into cryptid sites that keep such records. Kind of like MUFON, only for cryptids. About 25% of these sightings involved good enough views of the animal to make the person believe they were seeing a real live flying dinosaur. The reports are not anywhere near the number of people who may have had a sighting. Most won't send in a report, thinking the nasty, noisy, negative folks will make fun of them. You also run into a new problem. Today, drones have been seen flying about that look just like a pterosaur. For about $90, you can buy a drone that looks like a giant flying creature. The Jurassic World Pteranodrone looks very much like a flying creature from the past. The wings even flap up and down, but nothing else moves. Only from a distance do these flying things really look real. Now, not a flying dinosaur, there were some really huge birds seen all over the Rio Grande River. In 1976, residents of South Texas, Rio Grande Valley, were terrorized by a huge, ape-faced, winged beast, which, according to eyewitness reports, had 2 bright red eyes. This creature became known as the Big Bird, the same moniker as the affectionate yellow-plumed character from Sesame Street, but not the same pleasant personality. Those who encountered this big bird weren't thinking Muppets. They were thinking, this is some scary stuff. The first known sighting of the creature that would come to be known as the Big Bird occurred January 1st, 1976. 11-year-old Tracy Lawson and her 14-year-old cousin Jackie Davis saw the beast while playing in Lawson's backyard near Arlington, Texas. The 2 girls claimed they saw the creature standing approximately 300 feet away in an irrigation canal. Lawson, frightened yet intrigued, went inside to get her binoculars. When she returned, Lawson did not have the big bird she expected, but a mysterious monster was staring back at her. Not surprisingly, their parents, who had yet to hear any reports of the creature, were skeptical of the girl's story. The very next day, Tom Walden found 3-toed tracks near his home in Arlington, 8 inches across. If you're thinking maybe this was from an ostrich, ostriches only have 2 toes. Early in the morning, January 7th, a San Benito, Texas police officer named Arturo Padilla said he saw something unbelievable in the headlights of his cruiser. Padilla described the creature as looking like a really big bird, approximately 5 feet in height, with a 12-foot wingspan. The most intriguing aspect of this flying beast were its bald head and simian-like features. It also had bright red eyes. Almost immediately following this initial encounter, Padilla's colleague, Officer Homer Galvan, also reported seeing the creature. He was too far away to get a really good look, but he did say it was a huge black-winged creature flying overhead. He said it was bigger than any bird he had ever seen before or since. Later that same night, Alvaricio Guajardo and his nephew Ricardo were fishing on the banks of the Rio Grande. The pair also said they encountered the giant bird. They described it as having eyes as big as silver dollars and a long, skinny beak. They said it looked like a giant bird, but it also kind of resembled a huge bat. The next day, the Brownsville Herald ran a story about Guajardo's bizarre sighting and quoted Alvaricio as saying, "I was scared. It's got wings like a bird, but it's not a bird. This animal is not of this world." The bizarre description of a half-bird, half-bat has gotten some people to saying perhaps this was the Mothman from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. On January 14th, 1976, a Raymondville resident, Armando Grimaldo, told about how he had a harrowing encounter with this big bird. According to Grimaldo, he heard a loud flapping sound, which was accompanied by an odd whistling noise while he was walking outside. He glanced up to find the source of this strange noise. A pair of large, talon-like claws grabbed at the back of his shoulder, tearing his shirt and sending him crashing to the ground. Grimaldo managed to scramble to his feet and dove under a nearby tree for protection. He stared in horror as the big bird flew away. Neighbors responding to Grimaldo's shrieks say they found him in his backyard shaking and screaming. His shirt and jacket were torn to shreds where the shoulder used to be. Grimaldo would later describe his airborne assailant as a soaring, gorilla-faced creature with leathery, bat-like skin. This description sounds very much like folks living in Indonesia have been seeing. The creature known as the Ahul. The Ahul is the size of a 1-year-old child with gigantic wingspan of roughly 12 feet. It is reported to be covered in short dark gray fur, have large black eyes, flattened forearms supporting its leathery wings, and a monkey-like head. These flying creatures are sometimes known as flying monkeys in other parts of the area. On February 24th, 1976, 3 teachers from San Antonio said they had seen the big bird near Arlington as well. The trio said the creature did not look bird or bat-like, but it resembled a flying reptile. The school teachers said it was a pterodactyl or a pterodon. These bizarre sightings persisted in the area for several weeks, and it wasn't long before the press got wind and began big bird sightings in the newspaper. A local radio station offered a $1,000 reward for the capture of this creature. The incident would soon reach the apex of its fame when it was spoofed by Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. As the frenzy surrounding this phenomena peaked, Ed Dutch of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, thinking this would-be monster hunters might mistakenly shoot or kill a large, rare, endangered bird, announced that the birds were protected by state and federal law. We have a number of species of birds that do exist in South Texas in the valley area. Many of them have a wingspan of up to 10 feet, and some of them are on the rare endangered species list. The punishment for catching a protected bird could cost the hunter up to $5,000. So you get a $1,000 reward, and then you pay $5,000 for getting it. Not long after the initial flap of sightings, a 5-foot-tall Jibiru, the tallest bird found in South and Central America, with a wingspan of 9 feet, was found far north from the Latin American home, near the Rio Grande River. This, combined with video footage of a large blue heron, which was passed off on the local news program as genuine footage of the creature, led some to surmise that the whole big bird fad was nothing more than non-indigenous birds being misidentified by overeager witnesses. As the news media and folks around town began saying the whole thing was just a misidentification of birds from other parts, those who had seen the big bird became irritated as people acted as if they all had simply freaked out by seeing a bird that they didn't recognize. When people see something unusual and they aren't sure what it is, they don't immediately jump the gun and say it's a monster, especially if it looks like a bird. What the folks in the Rio Grande Valley and parts west of there were seeing was described as not being anything from this earth. It was not just odd, but otherworldly. Alex Resendez said he had seen the big bird 3 times during the 1970s. The first 2 sightings consisted of brief glimpses of the beast over Brownsville, but the third time, Resendez swore he saw it in broad daylight near his rural McCook area home. Resendez said the huge animal had landed not far from him in a cow pasture. Ranchers see big flying creatures all the time. Birds land to pick through the fields looking for bugs. What Resendez said he saw was something odd. This, combined with the fact that there had been cattle mutilations in the area, got him to thinking that what he was seeing was not a bird, but some kind of a monster. He said, "You have to look close because his beak is very transparent. If you see it real fast, you're going to think he ain't got no beak. I never seen a bird that big. He was brownish like dirt. He does not have long legs and does not stand like other birds." Resendez estimated that the brown bird stood over 4 feet tall, but before he could inspect it any further, an angry bull charged at the creature. The big bird unfurled its huge wings, which appeared to have blue or white stripes, and took flight. The short legs and translucent beak would seem to indicate that this is not a stork or a heron, as the skeptics all said. Texas has been known for thunderbird sightings as well. There are a few people who have speculated that the big bird may have been a thunderbird. American zoology scientists, those guys in the white lab coats that I like to pick on, say there's no evidence of thunderbirds ever having existed. There are no birds with ape-like features. That's what they say anyway. Indians have talked about thunderbirds for hundreds of years. To say, unless these people have been living in the area, put on a white coat, attach a bunch of letters after their name, they don't know what they're talking about, is wrong. But it doesn't stop some people from doing it. A PhD stands for Pilot High and Deep. You do know what folks say about people with PhDs. They know where the campus library is. Recently, people here in Laredo have seen some kind of a flying monster that they all said reminded them of the creature from the movie Jeepers Creepers. This thing has been seen mostly on the south side of town, around the Laredo College South Campus. Sightings have come in from around Rio Bravo and El Cenizo as well. People see this thing either flying through the sky or they actually see it on the ground. But every single witness said it looked like the thing from Jeepers Creepers. This next creature is more of a legend, but I know people who have seen this thing. La Lechuza, the owl woman. La Lechuza is a giant bird with the face of a woman. She has been seen all over Laredo and other towns along the border. The guys I've talked to over the years all said they'd seen what looked like a giant bird that was paying way too much attention to them as they walked along the street at night. They said that the bird looked to be 6 feet tall and that they all noticed it had a human face. Everyone I talked with said pretty much the same thing. They were terrified by this monster and they ran for their home. Once there, and they told somebody what they'd seen, either their mother or their grandmother would tell them that they had seen La Lechuza and were lucky to be alive. If La Lechuza wants you, you're doomed. If she doesn't want you, she'll just simply sit there and watch you go by. La Lechuza is supposed to have been a curandera who got on the wrong side of the town folks. They accused her of witchcraft and they hung her. The woman made a deal with the devil to come back to earth so she could wreak vengeance on her persecutors. After killing off the ones responsible for her death, La Lechuza managed to stay around, making life difficult for anybody that ran into her. To catch her prey, she is known to make the sounds of a baby crying out in the brush. Anyone that goes out looking for the lost child will never be seen again. If you want to travel around at night and not worry about becoming a meal for this giant bird woman, you need to carry a bunch of salt with you. If you see the La Lechuza, you need to make a circle around yourself with the salt and then wait for her to leave. Once she has lost interest in you, you're pretty much safe. Some people are afraid of snakes. I can understand that. Snakes are kind of weird creatures that can crawl around without any legs. I've seen enough snakes, and they don't scare me, but I'm not going around picking them up either. For those of you terrified by snakes, here is something to add adventure and excitement to your life. Flying snakes. June 1873, a farmer named Mr. Hardin, who lived a few miles east of Bonham, Texas, witnessed an enormous serpent, as large as a telegraph pole, flying through the sky. The snake had yellow stripes. It looked as if the serpent was riding through the clouds, moving just like a snake heading east. The farmer watched the snake as it disappeared over the horizon. In late July or early August 1887, near Bedford, Iowa, several people saw some kind of flying creature in the sky. One of the witnesses, Lee Corder, is mentioned by name in the news article. Corder noticed this thing up in the sky, and at first he thought it was just a bird. As the creature got closer, Corder said he became certain it was nothing he'd ever seen before. When it finally got close enough that he could study it in detail, he said the thing was a giant writhing serpent. The midsection was about a foot thick. The creature was covered with glistening scales, and it had a forked tongue that popped out of its mouth. When it landed with a thud in the cornfield, none of the witnesses were inclined to go take a closer look. Being 12 inches across, the snake would have been long enough to kill any man. The snake slithered off into the field. Nobody wanted to follow to see where it went. May 27, 1888, three sisters in Darlington County, South Carolina, ran into a 15-foot-long snake while walking through the woods. The snake was not on the ground, but up above the treetops. As the sisters watched, this snake sped by, moving about as fast as a hawk could fly. July 1897, Charleston News and Courier mentioned a sighting of a flying snake. It was sighted twice in July 11th near Newman Swamp, 10 miles south of Hartsville, at 6 and then 7 o'clock. The news article didn't give many details. Now I know there are snakes that can jump from tree to tree or to the ground. They don't fly, they sail through the air, but they do drop rapidly to the ground. The snakes flatten their bodies and wiggle back and forth to stay up longer than you would think possible. The snakes flying around the skies in the 1880s were flying along as if gravity was just for the others not to worry about. I'm not going to try coming up with an answer to what these snakes were doing, or what people could have possibly seen that looked like a snake but wasn't. As far as I know, these people saw a flying snake. The French explorer Jacques Marquette provided the earliest written account of a figure painted on the bluff near what is today Alton, Mississippi. He and Louis Joliet were checking out the area when they found petroglyphs on the side of a cliff. The image looked more like monsters than any animals the local Indians would have seen or painted. Asked about the paintings, the two explorers were told that this was the Payasa, or the Payasa Bird. This creature was as big as a calf, with horns that looked more like those of a deer. The Payasa had red eyes, and it had a beard like a tiger. The face was something like that of a man. The body was covered with scales, and this creature had a long tail that it would wind around its own body. The very end of the tail was like the tail of a fish. The Payasa was green, red, and black. In his diary, Marquette wrote up the technical details of this drawing that he had seen. He even sketched in a rough drawing of what the creature looked like, but unfortunately his book is no longer available. Got lost somewhere. The Piosa bird, also called the bird of the evil spirit or the bird that devours men. It was a fire-breathing winged creature that came up in legends of the Eleni tribe. There had been 2 murals painted by Indians along the Mississippi River near Alton, Illinois. The creature was said to have snatched members of the tribe living near the river. It would announce its presence by giving out a shuddering scream that was so loud it would cause the ground to shake. The beast was becoming very real danger to the tribe, so they began trying to kill it. They tried arrows and spears, but found the beast was hard to kill. It took them many years and many lost lives before they vanquished this flying monster. The picture that was painted on the side of the cliff eventually lost its battle with nature. The cliff face broke off and fell to the ground, but somebody was kind enough to recreate the pictograph on another location. If you go to Alton, Mississippi, you can find this pictograph, the new one, still available for your viewing pleasure. What was it that people were seeing up in the sky that some folks said was a pterodactyl and some people said was a snake? Some people described this unearthly monster, and other people would see the creature from Jeepers Creepers. As if life wasn't interesting enough, now we get to keep looking up in the sky to make sure that some flying monster isn't coming looking for his dinner. If you enjoyed tonight's show, I'm glad I was able to entertain you. If you'd like to hear more of the show, you can find me on YouTube, but you have to put in the whole name. Strange Things with Chris James. There's about 10 other podcasts that all use the same name. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?